Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Georgie Stripping the Dipping. My name's Colin Johnston, and I'm a motorsport writer and history geek, but mostly I'm a big motorsport fan and a lover of a great story. And our guest tonight has a CV that reads like a great story around the great racing teams of this last 40 years. He's chuckling already. So please join with me to welcome our guest tonight, Peter Hodgkinson. Peter, how are you?
Very good, Colin. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. I'm really good. Um, you're coming to us this evening from home by the looks of things. Where is home for you these days? You've travelled the globe.
I've travelled the globe, and it's in Brackley, Northamptonshire,
Well, here,
about half a mile from the front door of the Mercedes Formula One team.
close to the big Tesco.
Very close to the big Tesco. Yes, you obviously know it well.
I've been past. I've been past.
Yeah.
Well, as I said in the introduction, you've had this fantastic career in and around motorsport, all different categories, big names and big teams. But I suppose we should start by finding out where do you come from and how did motorsport first arrive in your life? How did you first discover racing?
Uh, I was born and raised in New Zealand, and I think motor racing sort of like it's almost important as rugby down there. And so you become quite aware of it very early on. I went to Auckland Boys Grammar School, which was a very big rugby school, and being quite small, I sort of struggled with that sport. And I also realised that at the age of 16 that there wasn't anything else left to learn for me, so I left. And my mother said to me, "Well, you need to get a job. You're not going to sit around here all day." So I went to the job centre, and you had to list 10 things you're interested in, and number 10 was cars, motor mechanics, and number 1 was golf course greenkeeper, number 2 was cricket ground, groundsman, etc. But I got number 10, and I got sent to work in a garage, and that was it. My hands were greasy from that moment forth. I got an apprenticeship, ended up getting an apprenticeship at a Ford dealership. They had a racing team, and this is where it started. If you're a good apprentice, you got to go car racing, and you got to go. You got to stay in motels, and you got to go around the whole of New Zealand, and it was the best thing,
Fantastic.
and that was it. I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. That's all I wanted to do.
And that brilliant thing about it's the two-sided thing of getting finding a trade that really works for you, finding that you're practical with your hands, and also that sort of the start of that rock and roll lifestyle of sort of seeing the world a wee bit and a bit of excitement alongside that.
Yeah. So I was desperate to go and see the world, and motor racing was going to be the way I was going to do that. So I worked a couple of jobs, 3 jobs, saved up enough money. And a good friend of mine from the Ford dealership I was working in, he had gone to America the year before. So I ended up going over to the States and meeting him in San Francisco. I left New Zealand from gate 6, and I landed in San Francisco at gate 111B. There was a gate 111A, there were that many gates. It was such a huge shock. And, we ended up driving across America to go and work in Detroit for Jack Roush.
Oh,
In 1986, Jack had just split from Protofab Engineering. He was on his own and was looking for mechanics. And, I was an imposter, really. I didn't know enough. There's no way I knew enough to walk straight into a factory Ford racing team. But we did. And it was difficult. It was really hard. And he had to learn very, very, very quickly. And in that first year, I had 1 weekend off in 9 months. We were living on the road. You talk about a rock and roll lifestyle. Motor racing was a bit different back then. I think it was closer to like touring with a rock and roll band.
yep.
It was we worked hard and we played hard. That's for sure.
And no doubt we'll talk about different generations and what you got up to most recently. But I would imagine then you've seen such a transformation in that lifestyle over the decades. As you say, we're in a very different world now.
Yes.
And while the hard work and the practicalities and just, for want of a better phrase, just getting shit done that needs to happen in motor racing stays the same, we're in a different world where people are treated in a different way and there's different expectations. So I imagine it was a very different time back then.
It was. You turned up to work in the morning at a racetrack, and as there's no swiping your pass on an electronic gate. You had your old paper pass, and you had a couple of passes, and you'd show somebody, and they'd let you in, and then you were generally greeted by a rather scantily clad lady standing there giving you either Marlboro cigarettes or Camel cigarettes, which immediately, because you're going to have a long day ahead, you stocked up on. And you then went to your truck, which was most probably the biggest advertising billboard you've ever seen for some brewery, and away you went. And your day, there was no such a thing as curfews or anything like that. Yeah. You just worked all day and all night.
Yeah, just needed to be done.
Yeah, and there was no big fancy motorhomes where you go and have your 3 square meals a day. You got excited about the hot dogs at Sebring. Yeah, I mean, your team, if you're racing at Sebring, the team manager will tell you not to go into the infield because he didn't want you to get caught up in some debaucherous trouble, especially in uniform. I mean, it was a completely different existence. I remember the first laptop car we had, where you needed a laptop. You had to plug a laptop into the thing to start it up. That was like, whoa, what's the world coming to? What's next? It was that was something else. But nowadays it's different. Mm-hmm. It's better.
Yes.
And it's more professional. We thought we were pretty professional, and we were. We took it very, very, very seriously because it was all we knew, and it was our livelihoods, and it was great fun. And it's still great fun, and the competition's still there. It's just the level of technology has gone up a notch. It's huge, isn't it? With everything that's going on, especially with the 2026 regs in F1, it's huge. Mm-hmm. And and the fitness of the guys, the fitness of the mechanics, and they really look after themselves now, and that's fantastic. And health and safety.
Yes.
Health and safety are a huge thing. I've got tinnitus. I've had so many ailments from, my knees are shot and everything else from not looking after myself correctly through all those years of motorsport, because we thought, it says motor racing's dangerous on the ticket.
Yep.
Yeah, that's your get out of jail free card for everything. But actually, no, it's not right. It's not right.
Yeah, it would never have been sustainable. Yeah, we've never got to today if things had continued. As much as we romanticise it and genuinely enjoyed it back then, yeah, times change.
Yeah, and for the better.
Absolutely.
And for the better.
So talk about Sebring. So what sort of cars were you guys running then? Was that IMSA cars? Or?
Yeah, so I was working, I did 3 years at Jack Roush. So we were doing GTO in IMSA, which was the next level down from GTP. So they would be, in the endurance races, we'd run V8 engined Mercury Mercurs or Ford Mustangs. And there were silhouette cars, basically, tube frame chassis. The only thing you had to have off the road car was the windscreen and the roof. The rest of it was silhouette. So with the turbo cars, we would race for the shorter races. You could have up to 1,000 horsepower out of a 2.3 litre 2-valve per cylinder single overhead cam.
Crazy.
Little Ford engine, and with a Wiseman gearbox, 5-speed gearbox, and a Wiseman differential. They were monsters. Those cars were beasts, and they were good, very, very good. No race engineers. If you're a number one on the car, you worked with your driver to, to do all the setup work. So you learnt very, very, very quickly about looking at spreads of tyre temperatures, tyre pressures. You learnt how to jack ride height, jack corner weights in the pit lane. Very, very, very quickly. It was great.
That's a great grounding on, by modern standards, a relatively simple racing car with relatively simple, if any, aero. So just the basic principles just instilled at an early age.
With enough aero, we had it on the McCurs, which was like a Sierra it was the American version of the Sierra Cosworth. We had we had quite a big rear wing on the back there, and we would trim gurneys and get the aero balance as best as we could. And you were looking at the data off the car as well, because we had a laptop now. you were recording data, and at that time. But yeah. So after that, I went to I did 10 years. I left Jack after 3 years, and I went to work for Tom Walkinshaw.
That's two enormous characters. That's two big personalities.
Yeah. Jack Roush. I roomed with him a few times.
Right.
That's how down to earth that guy was. He didn't really. All he cared about was creating horsepower and having really good, quick racing cars, and just going racing. And his engineering side, the engineering side of the business, sort of looked after itself, so he could just go racing. And he was down to earth in the trenches with you. Brilliant. Landing at racetracks in his private plane with 2 engine builders. They get out of the plane, and because the engine wouldn't fit through the door of the aircraft, he had to fly 2 engine builders there. So they took the cylinder heads off to get the engine in the plane, then to get it back out again, put the heads on, and then put it in the car. This is what it was like. It was great.
Proper motor racing.
Yeah. That was at Moroso Park in the middle of Florida. You had to watch. Be careful the alligators. Yeah, seriously.
Oh, yeah. Dear. So how did you get the gig with Tom Walkinshaw then?
I went at the end of the season, sort of prize giving for IMSA in Florida somewhere. We had won the IMSA GTO championship with Scott Pruitt and Lincoln Mercury, and Tony Dow, who was the team manager at Tom Walkinshaw Racing USA, he was standing there at the bar, and I walked up to him and said, "Hi, I'm such and such. I'm looking. Can I come and work for you?" And he said, "All right, I'll give you, come down to Valparaiso, and we'll have a job interview." I said, "Okay, that's great." And I didn't have a car at the time that would reliably make it from Detroit to Valparaiso and back again. So Lee White, who was the team manager at the time, and he went on to become the head of Toyota Motorsport in the US, he loaned me his Lincoln Mark 7, which is a very, very nice car, and for the opportunity to go down there. Yeah, and it was, I got the job.
Fantastic.
Had to start again at the bottom. Yeah. I'd been a number one mechanic on a GTO car, so I had to start again at the very bottom and prove again. Yeah.
So I guess this is the Jaguar era.
It is the Jaguar. Yes. So the XJR 9, XJR 11, XJR 12, XJR 14, Ross Braun's car, the XJR 16, which was a car that we did in the US. So we got to win Daytona in 1990, and then got to win Le Mans in 1990 with Martin Brundle, John Nielsen, Price Cobb, and on the number 3 Jag.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great days, and it's hard to even know where to start. You could probably make an entire podcast on that Le Mans and the Jaguars in motorsport in that era.
Yeah.
I guess it wasn't a huge step up in every way, but it must have been so fulfilling to be punching at that level and achieving those kind of results relatively quickly for you in your career.
Yeah, I'd left New Zealand with 2 really clear goals in mind. One was to work in Formula One, right? I wanted to work in Formula One. And number two was I wanted to work for Tom Walkinshaw.
Right.
Because I'd been done a lot of street races in New Zealand and watched the Rovers, Tom Walkinshaw's Rovers on the streets of New Zealand racing the Volvos, etc. I'd watched the big Jaguars across the top of Mount Panorama at Bathurst. And, here's this relatively short bloke, the size of a house, who seemed to be quite a character. And I thought, I want to go and work for him. And,
Yeah, I was just going to say that's the power of these figureheads that we've had through the history of the sport. That's the power of just getting racing cars in front of kids and having charismatic people running teams. It inspires new generations.
And we're very fortunate today that that's still going on, and with the power of Netflix and Drive to Survive and creating another medium for these these big characters to be seen, and no, it's great. It's really good. But Tom was fantastic. Tom was just like larger than life in every way, and I feel very fortunate that I worked with him and worked for him in that golden period. Winning Le Mans in 1990, personally for me, and to be on that car was a turning point of my career. I'd won a big race, something that is truly historic, and that was it. I was off then. There was no going back to New Zealand.
And your name's in the history book. That's your mark in the sand. Everything from here is upwards. And so you've worked with Tom Walkinshaw. So then Tom Walkinshaw is the perfect man in that time and era then to help you get towards Formula One, I would guess.
Yeah, we excuse me. The Jaguar program in the US finished sort of end of '93. And we're looking at going IndyCar racing. That didn't pan out, so we built a couple of Porsches in the US, and IMSA changed the rules at the very last minute, which rendered these Porsches uncompetitive. So Mr. Yost took them, and he won Le Mans with them in '96 and '97. But my first exposure to Formula One was when Tom got involved with Ligier.
Yes.
And we were between jobs in the US, so we were sent to work at Ligier on the test team, and so that was a bit of an early exposure to Formula One, and a bit of an early exposure to working in Europe, and the cultural differences of working in a French Formula One team. It was quite.
And in an era where testing was just. If you have the budget, just take a car to Magny-Cours or wherever and Paul Ricard and just run it.
Yep, that's right. You were doing, you might do 2 engines a day. You might do one at lunchtime because you've run the miles off in the morning, So you got to do 2 engines a day. Normally it was 1 engine a day, but you could just run and keep running. And of course you could work all night because there wasn't anything to stop you. There was no rules to this. So it was a complete free for all.
You were saying about the cultural differences, and another huge step, another continent.
Yeah.
What struck you? What sort of problems did you run up against, or what really felt different?
Well, in America we'd start work at as early as we possibly could. So we'd try and start 6:30, 7 in the morning, and we'd try and finish at 6, 7 o'clock at night. Where the French, you would turn up to work at 8:30. You'd have a few cups of coffee till around 9:30. You might do a little bit, then have another few cups of coffee and a couple of jetons. Then go and have 2 hours for lunch, and then work to about 9 o'clock at night. So it was understanding that, and how we could work around that to our advantage, so we didn't have to be there all night, which we managed to figure out. But yeah, no, it was a good experience, very good experience.
Hmm.
Um,
And again, you're probably looking, as I said, in that era when testing was so prevalent,
mm,
it was perfect for somebody like you coming to Formula One from another branch of motorsport. There was opportunity to learn so much
mm, yeah,
actually on track with a racing car.
yeah. I'll never forget. I was doing the lap board, and Rory Byrne was helping me with the numbers. Right? One of the most famous designers, you know, he was helping me with the numbers. I was like,
Okay,
wow, this is brilliant. I didn't, he wasn't a household name at the time, and
yeah.
so we were just chatting on the pit wall, like, what do we need next? Oh, we need this. Come on, Rory, hurry up, And there'd be Frank Durney. Frank Durney was there. Talking about his stereo collection and what speaker cables he was using and all this other stuff, and his watches. It was great. It was absolutely great. Yeah,
As much as I imagine we both love the sport today, there's something lost, from those days where it was slightly smaller, perhaps, and slightly more family-like. I guess these stories still happen, but
yeah, they
um,
do.
yeah.
They do. The teams might be big,
Hmm.
but inside those teams, you got a big team on the outside, and then you got all these little tribes inside it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you get in those tribes, and you have a really good time. There's lots of big characters still, and they're still there. It's just a different environment now.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So you're on the path. You're on the Formula One path.
Mm.
So I guess Walkinshaw buys arrows. Is that going to be the next step along the route?
Well, I go and I go and do Le Mans in '96. Half my year spent with Yost doing Le Mans, and then my other half of the year is in Japan doing Bridgestone tire testing, with a with a hybrid sort of. Well, there's a Mugen chassis with it was a Mugen engine with a Ligier chassis with a Williams gearbox, and we're thumping around Suzuka testing tyres for Bridgestone.
I think I can see that red and white car. I think I
That's
can remember that.
exactly it. Yep,
I can remember from back in the day.
yep.
Bridgestone
Jos,
coming into the sport.
yep. Jos Verstappen, Aguri Suzuki driving it all the time. Two engines a day because we were just thumping around doing tyre testing. Um, so that was 96, 97. I was the chief mechanic on the Nissan Le Mans program, 97, 98. So back to sports cars, so a few more
Great
Le
sports car.
Mans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great sort of golden era for sports car
Mm.
racing in some ways. Um, After Le Mans in 98, did a little bit of arrows. For I did Spa in 98. If you can think of Spa in 98 and the carnage
Yeah.
of that weekend, that was the hands ached after that. And then I went to work. Then I went to work for an American billionaire, Don Panos, for 9 months.
Of course. Yes.
Uh,
That was as before the Delta Wing thing. Is this a big roadster? Would that be?
Yeah. It was the first of the open. We chopped the roof off the coupe thing, whatever it was, and went to Le Mans with him in 99. And that was he. You could do a whole podcast on Don Panos by himself. One of the most fascinating people I have ever met, and this, for the first time, I'd met a person who his whole life hadn't been motorsport. His whole life had been pharmaceuticals,
Yes.
and golf courses and hotels and all these other things.
Mm.
And he was a billionaire who wanted to become a millionaire, so he got into car racing and he started up his own car company, and just fantastic, just so much energy, and so interesting, just so interesting.
And a whole different perspective, I suppose, on life and business, as you say,
Oh,
compared to these racing figures who have like yourself, have an early passion and are driven, but coming to it from a completely different angle and having different expectations, I suppose, from the business.
yeah. No, he did it for all the right reasons, but he did it his way, and
Yes.
he really wanted to preserve American sports car racing and make it something special, make sure IMSA kept going, and he wanted very much to be a part of all that and play his part in preserving sports car racing. He was pivotal in that, I think. And I only worked for him for 9 or 10 months. I was team manager. I got to sign on at Le Mans as a team manager, which was another sort of really important thing by that for me. Yep. But I'd had this job opportunity to go to BAR.
Yes, that would be the establishment of '99 was.
It was their first season. Mm-hmm. I wasn't there. They started in 97, 98, but their first season was 99. And after Le Mans in 99, I left Don and went to moved to Brackley, so to speak. Don was saying, "Why do you want to go and do Formula One? Blah blah blah." And I said, "It's just an itch I've got to scratch." "No, you'll regret it. Come and stay here in America, etc., etc."
Well, one glance at your CV, I think, would suggest that you're very glad that you moved to Brackley.
Yeah. It was tough. It's tough at first, though.
That was a brand new. Was it Reynard based?
Yes.
The BAR.
Yes.
At the core of it.
Yes. You had Adrian Reynard, Rick Gorn, Craig Pollock, Malcolm Osler was the technical director. Very much a Reynard project. And yeah, it's like any new team. It takes time to gel. I mean, I think Cadillac, to this point, if I talking about new teams, I think Cadillac have done a remarkable job to go out and be that reliable. Okay, the car might not be the quickest, but you've got to have a reliable platform to build performance on, and I think they've done a pretty good job, of doing that. I'm really impressed by that, and because it's so difficult. I know how difficult it was when I got to BAR, and it was already 6 months into the project, as I got there halfway through 99 after Le Mans. And the struggles that we were going through, we couldn't hardly finish a race, let alone finish a lap. I mean, it was really, really difficult. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and it took a long time to get to where we needed to be.
And I completely agree with you about Cadillac. They've done a fantastic job on a rather small scale, and it feels in the best way a rather old-fashioned approach where they've got the basics right, and they've got a racing car that runs and is doing the laps, and whatever the times may be, they're going to show up and put on a good showing, and maybe make a couple of others look a little bit silly, perhaps, in Australia. Yeah,
those regulation changes are huge opportunities for people to reset and go. So, I think Australia's going to be absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Q3 is going to be gripping.
Absolutely. It's almost like we almost can't imagine how it's going to be. I know they talk in terms it's the biggest reset ever or whatever, but in terms of actually going motor racing, how guys queue up their outlap and go qualifying, and even what a race start will look like, sound like, what the effect of it will be. We're in uncharted territory, I think. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. But yeah, we'll have to see. I must admit, I do miss, the best thing about those, the first year was Supertech engines, and then we went to Honda. And Honda came on board, and by 2004 we finished second in the World Championship, which was a great achievement. And we started to get really good people on board, like Jeff Willis arrived from Williams, and he really made a big difference to the team. Then we win a Grand Prix. To win a Grand Prix, with Jensen in 2006, it was fantastic, and something I'll never forget that ever. That moment, that afternoon, was something really special, really special. And success for Let me see if I got my timeline right. But by that stage, it really is Honda BAR, and Honda's at the heart of it.
Yeah, the Honda. I think 2003 onwards. I think it was pretty much Honda, full blown Honda, and yeah, it was.
That's that day, that win. With no involvement watching at home myself, it was a big day in the sport. So I can't imagine what it's like for you guys
Yeah,
working so hard for years.
I hadn't won a race in a long time. I
Yeah.
think it was 96 at Le Mans must have been the last time I'd won a race. 11 years.
Mm.
When I started my career at Jack Roush. We won 9 championships in 3 years. Then you go to Walkinshaws, and we were pretty successful there, winning a lot, and then you get to Formula One, and you realise what a step change it is
Yeah.
to go from sports car racing teams that are 60, 70 people to Formula One teams of 400 people back then, to what Formula One teams are now, with 13, 1400 people. Yeah, what a huge step change just at that time going to Formula One was, and I, yeah, again, I remember I felt like a huge imposter because I'd never really worked at that top level of motorsport before. Even though I had all this experience, had 15, 16 years of experience up until that point, I had to reset again and go down again, and then keep working, to earn the respect and the right to be there in a lot of ways.
That's really interesting.
Mm.
Of course, we know that Formula One sits above everything else in
Mm.
so many different ways. But it's really interesting that you felt that coming as a Le Mans winner. Um, Coming into it, there was still that sense that this really is a step beyond, and I really have to prove myself all over again.
Yeah, I came from cars with doors and roofs, right? And a lot of people, when at that stage, when you get into Formula One, there's two sort of motorsport formulas, isn't there? You've got all the open wheel guys, and
Yeah,
then you got the doors and roofs and headlights. Yeah, it's
yeah,
two different disciplines: endurance racing versus short sprint races. And I think personally for me, I was really glad I did the endurance racing thing because it taught you how to really think on your feet. At 2 o'clock in the morning, when you're tired, you've got gearbox oil pissing out all over all over the place. How are you going to fix it?
yeah.
How are you going to fix this? Or you're overheating, or this is something, this is broken. The gear lever's not working anymore. All right, get a bungee cord. Let's wrap a bungee cord around it, and that'll pull it back into neutral. All these little things that you've got to think of. Endurance racing teaches you that, and then you can bring those skills into Formula One, that mindset into Formula One.
Yes.
Yeah, we can fix anything.
Hmm.
We can do anything, and you
I
can.
think, yeah. I think it's a quote from Gordon Murray. I think he said, working with the McLaren project at Le Mans, that he regarded Le Mans as being like an entire Formula One season compressed into the week of Le Mans,
Mm.
in terms of intensity and problem solving and everything that comes with
Mm.
endurance sports car racing.
Mm. No, he's right. But then when you get into Formula One, and I worked the majority of my career in F1. I worked in a factory, so you're in this building every day. There is no glamour. Trust me, there is no glamour. The office we had, my office in the middle of that building had no natural light. There were 6 or 7 of us crammed into a space that was big enough for four. The ceiling tiles were stained from the water leaks. It smelt. It was because it had too many blokes in it, and there were bits of racing car everywhere. It was a great environment. If you loved car racing, it was the best place to be. It really, really, really was. Yeah.
I was going to jump in and say, like, that sounds actually really a romantic vision of motorsport for me. That yes, with all this glamour, particularly around Formula
Mm.
One, but
Mm.
the heart of the sport is, yeah, long hours under fluorescent light, problem solving.
Yeah.
That to me is the heart of the sport.
Yeah. And, and you get into this thing of you just in this battle for a whole season, race after race after race after race after race, and before cost caps, and you get into a big development cycle. And away you go. Once you get into the season, away you go, and it just becomes mind-bending.
And I suppose in that period with Honda behind you, at the sort of the end of that Honda period, famously ending when it did, I imagine the resources were pretty substantial.
Yeah.
By the standards of the day, that if you guys had an idea, a project team could run with it.
Yep. Yeah, very much so. But when Ross arrived at Honda, Ross really changed everything. I mean, you meet people in the sport. Ross Brawn turns up, walking through the door with all his world championships behind him, and again he brings us from working at this level to working at this level, and you've got to figure out how you're going to get to this level, and quick, because it's obvious that this is how Ferrari do it, and we know we're close to Ferrari, so we've got to what's in this performance gap here, and we've got to get on that pretty quickly, and he challenged us every day, and you learned how to how to deliver what he was looking for, and you raise your own standards, your own game, your own performance off the back of that, and that's what people like Ross, the impact that someone like Ross Brawn has on a Formula One team at that time was huge. And thank God he was there.
thank God he was there. Is right. I'm sure everybody who's listening knows that. For 2009, there was a very nice Honda design ready to go for the Formula One season, and the world fell apart in Formula One terms. So, and again, we talk about things that could be an entire podcast on their own. That 2009 season, where the name above the door changes and all the stickers come off the car, and for a guy who likes the olden days like me, I absolutely delighted in seeing a Grand Prix car winning a race with no branding on it whatsoever except for the team name. But what comes to mind if somebody says to you, "Wow, you were there for that season"? What comes to mind?
It's a real roller coaster. The whole thing's a roller coaster of emotions, because the first emotion is we might not have a job. The second emotion is we've been saved. The third emotion is, wow, we go testing, we're really quick. The fourth emotion is that you got to stop wearing your Honda uniforms. Everything's gone, so you're wearing back in street clothes again. The fifth thing is you go to the first Grand Prix and you win the first Grand Prix, which is brilliant. And the week after that, we lose half our workforce through redundancy. So you have this incredible high of actually getting, cutting the back of the chassis off, cutting bell housings off, fitting Mercedes engines and getting it all to work and going testing. And then you have this incredible moment of winning, like 1-2. 1-2. Wow.
At a counter. Easy.
Yeah. And then you got to say goodbye to so many really good friends, and if unfortunately I had to sit in the room and make a number of people redundant, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and it was awful, so awful, and so you got to pick yourself off the floor and keep going. You got a racing car to support, because it's your future. That's it.
Yes.
As well. You've got a lot of skin in this game now, and we couldn't print in colour. There was no colour printing. In fact, there was like only two or three printers in the whole building. I mean, but the whole
so tight financially, it was like
yeah.
Don't print stuff.
Yeah. Don't print stuff, and the building was empty because all of a sudden half the people are there.
Yeah.
and you're rattling around in this place, and you had enough wheel bearings to do the season. Everything was managed so closely. We had enough oil tanks. I remember all these different really critical parts. There was spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet, and we would spend most of our days just managing these bits, keeping brand new wheel bearings for Monza. Things like that. We were so close. So again, this real disciplined approach to things. We had the terrible issue with Felipe Massa in Hungary, just before the shutdown as well, which was another moment.
Yeah.
Then we recover. We do really well at Monza. That's brilliant, and we cling on by our fingernails to that championship, and absolutely, it's a whole thing is just like this, and you never forget it.
Yes.
And you were a part of it.
Well, I was going to say you're a part of it. You never forget it, and fans will never forget it. People who aren't following the sport now will be talking about this when we're all gone. But what comes to mind is your resilience and your experience in sports car racing and managing finite resources and problem solving. Maybe not even consciously, but I would imagine that sort of played a part during that year, experience of doing without and make, do and mend that sometimes happens in sports car racing.
It does, but I think I'd been out of sports car racing a long time by that point, and I think your resilience point is very good. You had to be very, very mentally resilient. Mm-hmm. So, we were starting to think more about our human performance at that point, as well as our technical performance, and starting to have conversations around culture. Wow, something new's coming along here, and it was hard. I mean, sometimes when you're in the moment, when you're in these moments, you become very blinkered because you're just dealing with what's in front of you every day, and you don't really realize until 10 years later how important you were really a part of something that people get very excited about and was super important in motorsport history.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, I'm really proud of it. Really proud of it.
And rightly so. You're talking about you're talking about philosophies around the business and new ways of thinking. Let's say ushers in the Mercedes era at Brackley as the Braun 002 turns into a Mercedes Benz, and again, so much has happened there. Mercedes enters with Schumacher and Rosberg. Braun moves aside, and Toto Wolff comes in. There's huge success over an extended period, which is wonderful. But also coming back to that thing you were talking about, team culture and new ways of thinking, I think it's probably a decade or so which the sport in that regard changed the most, perhaps. What do you think about the changes in culture and ways of working and how Mercedes went about that?
I think you're right. I think from 2010 to 2020, I think there was a fundamental shift, because we stopped thinking just purely about technical performance, and half of your world is technical performance, the other half of your world is your human performance. And all of a sudden it's not smart to work 100 hours a week anymore. That's not right.
Yep. And it's not productive. It's not getting the best out of the people.
That's right. You're inefficient. You're inefficient now. You got to work smarter, and you can deliver more in less. And so that's what we did. And how do we talk to each other? And how do we interact with each other? And how do you turn up every day? How do you turn up in a meeting? What are your behaviours telling the group and the language that you're using, telling that group of human beings that are in that room with you that you're meant to be leading? There was a shift, and Toto started it I think when Toto tells a story, when you first turns up at Brackley, there was a used coffee cup sitting on the table in front of him at reception, and a copy of the Daily Mail, which was 3 days old. Right. So what was our standard at that point? Our standard was down here. You know, Ross had got us to. Ross had taken us to a pretty good standard, and now
at a sporting level and a technical level.
That's correct. And now Toto took us to the next level, which was a bit more about people performance. And he brought in some fantastic people from other industries, and that was absolutely key. That was absolutely key, and we really kicked on then.
Mm. I see sort of from your timeline, obviously you're at the heart, you're involved with the build of this generation of fantastic Grand Prix cars. But ultimately within the organisation, you make a move more toward, I want to say HR, you make a move more towards the people side of the business.
Yeah.
Is that inspired by the Toto philosophy and what you've seen on the shop floor?
In 2015, the chief people officer, a guy called Paul Mills, was looking for external experts to help us with our human performance improvement. And this guy called Kerry Evans, Dr. Kerry Evans, turns up. Works with the All Blacks, and he has this mindset model. And I sit there and I go through this bit of training, and I've had tons of training. And I'm sitting there going, wow, this is really interesting. I can do this. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I can give this a good go. Yep. And so this is 2015. And I got my team leaders sort of trained up in it. And then it became a bit of a train-the-trainer sort of model. I started delivering this training because I sort of really thought it was a performance opportunity for the team as a whole. And you're always saying, how can you deliver your 10th of a second every season? Where's your 10th for the car? Yep. And so I thought this could be an opportunity for me to bring 2/10 even if I do a good job of it. And so I started to deliver this training and do all sorts of things for HR as part of my head of build role. Mm-hmm. And then after 20 years of F1 car builds, I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to become head of employee engagement at Mercedes, and move from this horrible little office downstairs in the middle of this factory to go upstairs onto the first floor and look outside and have a sort of desk with a window and see the world and learn a whole new set of skills in a completely different environment, working in an HR team, in a Formula One team. And it's like, wow, these HR people, they care just as passionately as you do about the racing car. Mm. And what they bring is completely different, and it goes unseen a lot of times. But it is so important, because without these humans, you can't do your job. You can't recruit people. You can't recruit the best people. And there's so many. You can't keep people safe. You've got to have a great health and safety team. So, and I learned all these different things. It was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Learned a lot about leadership, where I've been screwing up for the last last 20 years. I could see all the why people behaved in certain ways when you did certain things, and you think, oh God, why have I done that? You didn't know any better.
Well, that's it. You didn't know any better.
You didn't know any better, and this is the way it was done, because you'd been influenced by the people who had led you over the years. And teams are only a reflection of their leader, right?
Yes.
And that's a really true statement, I think. Mm-hmm. And so, I was given that opportunity. And did that for a couple of 3 years before moving on to the America's Cup.
Wow. But one thing that comes to mind is how nice of a sort of circular thing that it was skills learnt via the All Blacks. That goes back to the start of your story. That is resurfaced in your timeline to sort of to influence your thinking again and kick you forward on another route.
Yeah.
But that's all it's fascinating, and it comes back to what I was saying before about how times have changed so much, and quite rightly, people's expectations, and how people are treated, and how people go about work, and how people achieve better results by being happier, more contented, more fulfilled people. It's a really fascinating subject, and it's great. It's great to see our sport engage with that in such a positive way.
Yeah, pressure is everything, isn't it? And you mentioned resilience, and how can you stay in those difficult moments? Where do you go as a human being when you're under pressure, and how you can manage that? And it's applicable not only for motorsport, but it's applicable for everything in life. From the moment you get up in the morning, depending on your household, you can be under pressure. Yeah, and you can be under pressure until you go to sleep at night. And if you can learn how to manage that, and then not only manage it, but turn it into an advantage, performance advantage for you as a person, as an individual, that's really powerful. That's really powerful. And then combine that with a few other things, psychological safety, intent-based leadership, you're really off to the races.
Yep. I think psychological safety is such, I'm going to call it a modern thing, but it's such a fantastic phrase and way of thinking that we've all worked in environments. An old bloke like me has all worked in all sorts of different environments where that has not always been the case, and that being accepted in large organisations now it's so important to the health and well-being of people, and it's so important to the outcomes that companies have and the achievements they have through staff who are comfortable in engaging and not being judged, and bringing their true self and their experiences and their ideas in an honest way.
Yeah, no, I sort of had one rule, which I used to use quite a bit, and I still use it. No surprises, right? Is the rule.
Yes.
Right. Surprises are for birthdays and Christmas only. Okay. Now, the idea behind no surprises is I want to hear what you've got to say. Yep. I want to know, no matter how bad it is. If you've made a mistake, I want to hear it, because then we can do something about it. Yep. I want you to speak. I'll be really upset if you don't. You're going to be in trouble if you don't speak. It becomes a different thing, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, because if it's a surprise, and you knew something about it, wow,
that's a problem.
That is a problem, and we've got to respond here.
And the fact is, it may have happened because of processes and other things. It comes back to you're not to blame. This situation has arisen. Let's be open and honest about where we find ourselves. We'll move forward, and we'll all learn and do it better the next time.
And that it's important to understand failure as well, when things go wrong, because there's three types of failure. There's innovation failure, like crash testing. Yeah. There's complex failure. So you might have a car doing a VTT on the dyno, and the engine blows up, because the fuel pump, because the code wasn't quite right, so the fuel pump, one of the internal fuel pumps failed, which then leaned the engine out, which caused the engine to blow up. So that's a complex failure. And then you have process failures. So the process might be too difficult to achieve, or the task might be too hard to achieve, or when we get right down the end of it, you just didn't follow the process. Yeah, you just didn't follow it. You were negligent. And so looking at failure like that, it helps you define your response to failure. What are you going to do when these things happen? Right down the far end, you're going to have to give someone a bit of a telling off, but sometimes when things go wrong, it's the process that's not supporting the people, the human being. And you have to, the big challenge for a leader in a competitive engineering environment is putting the right processes and procedures in place to be able to support the human being to the point where they want to follow the process, not have to follow the process. If people have to follow something, they're less likely to do it.
Yep.
Right? So they've got to want to do it because they can see the benefit.
And they've got understanding, they've got skin in the game, they can see how and why it works, so
Yep.
then they're happy to follow the process.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a bit of a cultural shift. You think, why are modern Formula One cars so reliable? Well, it's because there's been a cultural shift in the fact that the technicians want that support now. They want to make sure that they've got the right documentation, that we've got you're using the right cleaning machines, we've got the right torque wrenches, we've got all this. Everything has to be right now to do the job. It's not, she'll be right, mate, we'll just click it up and that feels good enough. Oh, I'll just take any old O-ring out of my top drawer, fit that. No, you can't do that. And they understand that now. That's why these cars are so reliable, because there's been that cultural shift in how the job is done. The level of professionalism has gone up another notch. The guys are really good. Guys and girls back then were really good, but they were working to the highest standard that they knew at the time. The standards had just shifted.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I suppose if you have that high standard and you have the processes, and things don't become easy because it's still hard work, but things, because of process, become repeatable in terms of excellence as well. I imagine then that gives you extra headspace and extra capacity to deal with problems that then do arise. Because if you can control the regular things in a perfect way, it gives you more capacity to deal when the shit hits the fan.
And I think motor racing, working in a motor racing team or that competitive engineering environment, it should be 80% plan, 20% chaos. I like that. I like the chaos because that gives you the reason to get out of bed in the morning. That's where the challenge sits as well.
That's where the creativity is as well.
Yeah. But having really robust processes and standing operating procedures and all these things. So if something does go wrong on track, it's very easy. First off, they didn't build it correctly. Oh, yes, we did, because here's the sign-off documentation, here's the lifing sheets, here's the build sheets, here's the check sheets, here's all the stuff to say that we did our job correctly. Okay, so now we've got an engineering problem. So we can jump on the design solution much quicker because we've got a evidence-based, data-driven approach to things. Yeah, and so actually it is a design error. It might be a design error that we couldn't put it together properly. Yeah, but you're off getting a solution much quicker. So it goes to your point of being more efficient and effective, which is critical in a cost cap world. Absolutely critical.
Course.
Yeah,
of course. Yeah.
You haven't got time. It costs money for all these reliability fixes.
Yep. And we're seeing that. In a way in Formula One testing, where we have a cost cap today, but we have a time cap on the testing before this coming season, and then you see like the poor folks at Aston Martin, what they're going through at the minute. That's restrictions like that there. Just cause all sorts of problems that tumble on.
Things like Aston Martin that I do feel sorry for them. And it's really disappointing, but at the same time, it's nice to see someone perhaps I don't understand all the ins and outs of it, but perhaps pushing the design envelope, really, really hard and coming up with something that there's a gamble there, and there's not too many gamblers left anymore. I'm sure Mr. Stroll doesn't see it that way right now.
I wouldn't like to be answering to Mr. Stroll this week, but
no. All the ladies and gentlemen at Honda are much be, there's going to be a lot of work to do there. But in the modern world, you don't see that very often of someone like giving it everything, and you got to take your hat off to it in some ways.
That's true. Yeah. I suppose we get to enjoy, and there's a sense that not always, quite often with the Red Bull designs back in the day, a few years ago, they always became reliable, more performant from the summer on. So, perhaps now we're seeing Adrian Newey sort of unrestricted at full blast. And while we may not have a championship contender, perhaps in the second half of the season, when things start to point in the right direction, we'll see the fruits of some pushing the envelope.
Yeah, and it's a good point you just raised there. I always thought at Mercedes we were quite conservative, you know, especially in those championship years, learning not to mess it up, and keep resetting, because you are representing Mercedes-Benz, right?
Yes.
That's a huge global car company, where down the road at Milton Keynes, no offence, that's just fizzy drinks. Yeah.
Yep.
It's a slightly different thing. So if a Mercedes-Benz parked on the side of a racetrack, it's not a good look, is it?
Yep.
You know, with steam coming out. So I think we had a little bit more to lose.
Yes.
And so we had to perhaps operate in a slightly narrower window because of who we were representing, and that's important. You know, the people who sponsor you, your partners, you've got to do a great job for them. It's absolutely critical, absolutely critical. Otherwise, what's the point of being in motor racing?
Exactly. Yep. It's a symbiotic thing between brands and money and constructors and racing organizations. You know, we all lean on each other.
Without them, I don't have a career. You know, so got to look after them.
You got to look after them. Well, talking about performance engineering, moving lane to Ineos Britannia, that must have been a fascinating project. And I was going to say a step away from racing cars, but perhaps it's just the same philosophy on water.
Yeah.
How did you find yourself involved with that project? And what did you make of it?
I got back from the summer shutdown in 2022, and my boss called me into his office, and there was Rob Thomas was in there as well, and it was the America's Cup team needs a bit of a hand. How would you feel about going to do that?
It's not a sentence you hear every day.
No, but I've always, you know, being from New Zealand and sailing and everything else, I remember when New Zealand lost the America's Cup in the early 2000s, I wrote a letter to Grant Dalton, who was the team principal of the New Zealand team, saying, look, I'm over here doing some Formula One stuff, but if you want a hand, mate, give us a shout. I'll come back to New Zealand and go help you on the America's Cup. Because you always want to sail at some point, represent your country if you can. And I thought that cup racing could be the way to do it. But anyway, I got involved with the UK side of things, with Ineos and Ben Ainsley, and I went there as the build operations manager for the cup. And again, you go back to a very small team. So it's like going sports car racing again, but without the doors and the roofs. Instead, you got cyclors and sailors and just this massive boat, huge, just a huge project. Really interesting project. You think the surfaces on Formula One wings and bodywork has to be smooth. It is nothing compared to when you're dealing with foils, you know, foiling yachts at 50 knots, and cavitation, separation, you know, ventilation, all the things that these foils go through on a boat. Yeah, it's a very, very, very interesting project in so many ways. Just learnt so much. Everything's so big, you know. Everything's huge, you know. You're craning things around. You actually go and go get a crane or a couple of cranes to turn the. You know, imagine turning the hull over. You know, when you're doing all the safety checks and stress testing and load testing the hull. I mean, all the weights involved in that. It's unbelievable. And the hydraulics. 600 bar hydraulics. It's a whole different world, but it's competitive engineering.
Yep, it's the same philosophy at the end of the day. It's
competitive engineering, and it's pretty much the same philosophy, except it's in salt water, so everything corrodes. and there's all these products you never knew existed, like Salt Away. Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, there's a product called Salt Away that you can spray on everything and get rid of all the salt. Yeah, you learn all this stuff. It's very interesting.
Fantastic.
Mm.
Well, what are you up to these days, Peter? What's on the horizon for you? Are you working on any projects or thinking of anything?
I'm sort of started up my own sort of leadership consultancy, um, and I've got a number of clients already, which is great. But always obviously looking for more. But just based around my experience in motorsport and bringing what I've learnt in Formula One to other organisations, and improving the way that you walk into a room and the impact that you can make as a human being especially when you're leading a team and on a daily basis, and just some of those key skills that perhaps we forget,
Yeah.
and the importance of psychological safety, and the importance of the performance advantage of managing pressure, and then intent-based leadership, creating leaders at all levels of an organization, moving the responsibility down to the people who have the real information, and how you can really get teams to gel and work together in a new and exciting way. That's what I'm interested in now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, and a wee bit we spoke about it before, but how you came to these learnings, over this last decade and a half or whatever. In a way, this is. We used to look to motor racing to invent a better road car. Now, with us looking at human performance in our sport, this is almost the big takeaway from motorsport for the 21st century. Is how to improve the performance of the guy holding the nut and the guy designing the nut and the nut who's holding the steering wheel. That seems to be the cutting edge of our sport now, as much as the engineering sometimes.
Yeah, and how to get the best out of the guy that's designing the nut after he's been at that desk for 14 hours.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he's got deadlines. And how are you going to treat him afterwards? How do you create some psychological closure for him so he feels a sense of achievement so he can keep going? How can you reduce burnout? How can you do all these different sorts of things? Or not reduce burnout? Let's not have burnout. Let's just not have it, because if you're having burnout, we're not managing our people correctly. Someone said once, and I think Ron Dennis said, an all-nighter is nothing more than bad management.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of truth to that. And we did all-nighters, but we used different crews to do all-nighters. We managed it differently.
Yes.
Yeah, you work around the clock, but you just manage it with the people and the resources you have available.
That's it. If you've burnt out people or workload not being dealt with, it's a management and resource problem. It's not. It's the poor people on the front line have to deal with the problems of it, but it's not their problem.
Yeah, human error is inevitable, isn't it? So, how can we help the human? How do we support the human not to make mistakes? It is absolutely key. And then how do they respond to it? And also when they do make a mistake, which they will, how are you as a leader going to respond to that mistake? That will change everything.
Yes. Yep. Particularly that first interaction. Yep. And the first interaction probably often touches to the heart of the culture.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Very much so.
I find it fascinating. I find it really, really interesting.
Yeah. I do. I do. I really do. Yeah, I really do.
Well, tell me this, Peter. If people have heard this and, like me, they're really interested in what you're doing, how can they get in touch with you to talk more, to maybe engage with you as a consultant? Where can people find you?
Just find me on LinkedIn. A one-stop shop. Yeah. Just
hard to beat.
Just search for me on LinkedIn, and I'm there. And send me a message. And we'll jump on a call and talk more. Fantastic.
Well, here, I'm so grateful for your time this evening. It's genuinely really interesting because it touches to so many things that I'm interested in, and I hope people have got something from it, and I hope people engage with you and engage with the podcast. But for this evening, I'd just like to say thanks so much for your time, Peter, and thank you for joining us this evening.
No, thank you, Colin, for organising this. I really appreciate it, and really nice to spend the evening with you. Thank you very much.
And you. We'll speak soon. Thanks, Peter.
No problem.
And thanks everyone at home. All the best.
See you later. Bye-bye.